Stephen said, we went to South Africa. It was not our idea. We knew an older missionary who asked for some help, and we prayed about it. We prepared for a long time. We raised some support, and we went. But what is the missions? It's basically just the practice of putting into place the Great Commission that we read about in Matthew chapter 28. Stephen, can I have you read that? Matthew 28, 16, 20. Amen. So that is what we call the Great Commission. Y'all have heard that, I'm sure. Good, solid church, good praying church. That's just, I cannot tell you how wonderful that is. But who is it that this is directed to? Back in the day, it was to the disciples. But today, all the disciples are dead and buried. So it's really all the believers. We are the current generation to reach the lost. That's our job. We came after Moses, Isaiah. We came after King David. We came after Samuel in the Old Testament. Heard God calling him by name 4 times. He didn't recognize the voice of God the first 3 times. You can look it up. You remember the story. The Old Testament, book 1 Samuel. He did not recognize it was God's voice calling him. And sometimes we're all like that. We miss recognizing God's voice. God's voice in the Old Testament was described as loud thunder. God's voice was described as the sound of rushing waters in Ezekiel and in Revelation. In Isaiah, God's voice comes as the sound of harps, probably comforting. Often now, we say that God speaks in a gentle whisper, a still, small voice. We hear that in our spirit. Sometimes my wife would tell you, I've heard, she's heard, we think we've heard an audible voice, and you just can't explain it. It must be God. And we need to be listening. This is the same Lord who is the Lord of all. This is the great I am. He introduced himself to Moses. Moses asked, who is this? And he said, I am. Okay? It's the one who gave us the job of reaching the lost. That's the job of the whole church. Now, I'm a very hands-on, practical person. So I always ask, how do you do that? How do you reach the lost? That's my question. So I drove here today. I saw fields planted up and down the highway. Kind of knew I would, so I wrote that ahead of time. I saw the corn growing and timber growing. Somebody planted it. Some farmer had to plow the land and select the seed and apply the fertilizer. This takes effort. Every step in the process takes time and effort. This is why we have the whole church. Somebody had to buy a tractor. Somebody had to hook up the harrow and plow the weeds. It's the individual farmer, and it was the whole farm family. Now it's summer and nothing is ready for harvest, but somebody still has to do the equipment maintenance. Somebody's got to be ready to run the combine. So we have a good head farmer here at this church. I've known him a couple of years. Appreciate him. Appreciate the whole family. In mission work, you are that farm family. Okay? No farm is run entirely by one person. It's a team effort for the whole family. That's the whole church. The farm family, the farm supply store, the fuel dealer, and including the banker. In mission work, it's not just the missionary family either. They're just the front face that we tend to focus on a lot of the time. But we're not in any way special other than God's called us for a time, for a reason. It's the whole church raising up the next generation. With our effort, it was in Africa. We've done it here some as well. I was fortunate enough to get assigned to Mexico once. But the church, the whole church, the people, it's mowing the grass, fixing the Wednesday supper. That's part of evangelism. It's part of building and growing the whole family. So the church is sending the missionaries out, financially supporting them and praying that they survive. A couple of times it was more than questionable for us. I tell you what, the church, by praying for people, keeps the missionaries alive. It's among the bandits and binds the witch doctors. Where we were, people, they worshiped with animism. They worshiped animals. And they worshiped the ancestors, those who died before. And they were afraid of the ancestors. It's kind of a unique situation because in the rural area where we were, nobody bought headstones for a grave. And somebody died, they'd bury you out on the side of a hill. They'd pick out a large rock. They'd put it at the head of the grave, and that was the headstone. 2, 3, 5, 10, 15 years later, somebody else might grab that rock and put it on another grave, and it was the headstone again. But you never knew where the graves were. We would be walking, and you didn't know who might be under you. So people were afraid. It's a strange thing. But the prayer of the church back home stops the bad things from happening. Not all of them, but a lot. There was a time I came up 2 a.m. A couple of guys had AK-47s, and they were not happy to see me. I was probably the only white guy they'd seen in a month. Drove a red truck. There may be a picture of it. On one side, in their language, it says Jesus is Lord. And on one side, in English, it says Jesus as Lord. But that's the way it goes over there. You need the support of the church. So I want to encourage everybody over the next week and month, year, 10 years, support missions in whatever way the church agrees to send somebody or help somebody. It's very vitally important. And everybody that's been in church a while has got good intentions, I'm sure. And somebody's probably thinking, well, I might would do that. But it's kind of dangerous, and it can be. Somebody might be thinking, well, there's no hurry. But I tell you, from what we've seen, people are dying, literally dying every day. The majority of adults that we knew have all died. Most of them died from HIV. Not because they did anything bad, but because it's a virus that's transmitted by blood and body fluids. Over there, it's a hot culture. People sweat. A little bitty cut on your finger and somebody else's sweat. And they shake hands frequently. It's an odd three-way handshake. But you could catch HIV by a handshake because it's in the sweat. And there's a tremendous number of the population that are infected. So people are actually dying. So it's important not to waste the time. Okay, let's turn to John, 4th chapter, 35. Let's take a look at that for a second. Stephen, would you read that?
Do not say there are still 4 months and then comes the harvest. Behold, I say unto you, lift up your eyes and look at the fields, for they are already white for harvest.
So we think, well, somebody else can do it. Somebody else can give. Somebody else can pray. I'm busy. The fields are ripe for harvest. Okay, I can feel I'm starting to choke up because it's so close to my heart. I've been there and I've seen it. The fields are ripe for harvest. You've seen cotton fields where it's all just white across, nice, beautiful. That's, to me, kind of symbolic of the fields in Africa, just overly populated with people who are hungry, literally hungry for the Word of God. They'll stop what they're doing and just look at you and just want you to talk with them. Or for us as Americans, it was our accent. We look funny, but we would just talk about the Lord. We'd talk about Christianity. Let's hear one more scripture. Matthew 9:35 to 38.
Then Jesus went out about the cities and villages, teaching in their synagogues, preaching the gospel of the kingdom, and healing every sickness and every disease among the people. But when he saw the multitudes, he was moved with compassion for them, because they were weary and scattered like sheep, having no shepherd. Then he said to his disciples, the harvest truly is plenteous, but the laborers are few. Therefore pray the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into his harvest.
So at any time, I really don't care if you're in Jenkins County or Bullitt County or anywhere else in the U.S., you can be the missionary in that moment. Share the gospel, the good news with somebody. There are so many opportunities if you're ready and willing. Be always ready to give an answer for the faith that is within you. Be always ready. So in our case, my wife and I knew an older missionary who sent out a letter and asked for help. Well, he included a job description, what he was looking for in a helper. And it was just about 100% my background. Some construction, some plumbing, good familiarity with the English language, willingness to stand up and make a fool of yourself if you needed to. I could do that. So after praying about it and gathering support, which took a long time, we sold our house and vehicles and we went to South Africa. 20-something hour flight. Yeah, there's heavy jet lag. So the next question for me, being very practical, is what is the actual work on the mission field? So I could kind of answer, not for all people, all missionaries that have gone all around the world, but just for us, what little bit we know. What do you actually do? Well, the job is to just become like Jesus to a flock of sheep, a flock of people who you're close to. Okay? My official job was to manage a remote mission station. It was out on the edge of a small town. Kind of go to the end of the paved road and keep going a little ways. That's where we were. The mission station had a small Bible college. It's for high school graduates that wanted to become pastors. It was an amazing group of young men and women. We had about 45 people. We had 12 buildings, and we had a well. So our place, potentially, if the power stayed on, had good quality water. It's a lot better than the local town, which drew their water from a pond. Okay. So we had 3 local pastors who would come and they would teach at the college. They'd teach at a local church right there on the campus. But they needed help constantly. So they asked me, one of them came and asked me, they said, Umfundisi, Stephen. Umfundisi is also a word that means pastor/teacher. I'd never been a pastor. I'd never been a teacher. So, but they said, we need a teacher. So I figured that's what the need is. So I said, okay, sure. So I was asked to teach 18 adult students in a Bible college. This is the Amakosa people who speak the language Isikosa. Okay? I taught English because I did not speak Osa. There's 3 ways to do that click, and there's 5 ways to do each of the 3 clicks. So it's a horrible language. Absolutely. But they were natives, in this remote part of a third world country. So I figured half of the students had a Bible in their language. So I taught world history and geography, political history, military history, as well as current events, and related it all to the Bible. They did not know, for example, that England was an island. At one point, I gave an assignment in small groups to go and tell the class what, basically, y'all talk about it for a few minutes and figure out what you would do, and I'm going to send you to each a different country. The group that went to England, theoretically, they said they would take the train to England. They did not know it was an island. Each group got stuck trying to figure out how to get a permit to leave the country. That was the biggest problem at the beginning of the assignment. This is a third world country with some of the best and brightest young men and women. But they just needed help. So the next thing I did was I just became a friend to them, because that's what the need was. We had to learn the basics of the language. You could go to, say, the village of Angash and eat show. And you could say depilele nam, and all these different things. Just the basics was hard for us because the language is very complex. We did learn the important things, and the important things are always the people. So we learned the names. Fuma, who was a pastor. I think he's in a white shirt here somewhere on a picture. Lazola is a pastor in a blue shirt. These were adult pastors who had never seen a computer, and we had a laptop. So they came over to the house. I taught them to use a laptop, and then later we had all the students come over to our house, and I taught them to use a laptop. It was mind-blowing. One typed, "Today I have written something on a computer," and I had him print it out, showed him how to do that. And it was just mind-blowing. And a lot of our job was to open their minds to the bigger world, so that after they graduated, when they were pastoring a church, they could express more. They could go with the Bible, which is the core and the basis of everything, but they would never sound ignorant. That was my point. So it was different. But Fuma and Safumba Lazola, who's a pastor who was teaching, he's died of AIDS. Sinesipo, little girl who was a friend of Gregory. Mabuselele, young man, also about that big, who was also a friend of Gregory. The picture there, this is the water that comes in from the town. This is before he took a bath. We just had him standing there for the picture. We put in rainwater catchment tanks so that we would have clean water. The rainwater is much, much cleaner than what we could get from the town. I put in 2 like that. They held about 4,000 gallons. But there's a dry season for about half the year. So we had water. You see Lazola and Fuma studying on a computer. They were just so thrilled to have that opportunity. But just to be the friend is what they needed. So day-to-day living in South Africa, how was it? What did we do? It's got its share of problems. The economy was bad. The exchange rate then was about 6 to 1. So one of our dollars was worth about 6 of theirs. Effectively, we were rich. We did not have a lot of support. But because of the exchange rate, and because we're out in the middle of nowhere just about, the supplies we could get were very minimal, but we could afford a lot. Crime was bad. At one point, Fuma called me over, He said, we have a problem. I said, what's the problem? He said, we have 3 girls that were assaulted by their classmates. They had to travel. They would walk. Everybody walked. They'd walk from their village down through the woods, across a little small river, up the next mountain to school. This was high school. Some of the young men decided they wanted to assault them, and they did. So we gave these girls shelter. We gave them counseling. They were traumatized, refused to go back to their village. They had nowhere else. So we gave them a hut, and they stayed there through the end of the school year, and we were able to help them get back and forth to school for the rest of the year. It was a very difficult time for them and for the rest. But there's a certain sort of justice over there. The police don't have the budget to do anything. They wouldn't even take a report. So we sent word back to the villages, and they caught the 3 young men. They beat one of them to death. One, they beat him very, very badly. The third one was last seen running for his life. Probably never went back. I wouldn't advise it. But that's the kind of difficulty that you go through over there. There was a medical clinic on the edge of town. The local doctor was a medical school dropout from another country. He came there. He knew more about medicine than most. And so he got a job there, minimal job, but he got it. We had a young man that had a wound, bad wound, 2 inches by 2 inches by 2 inches deep in his leg. The doctor wouldn't even get out of bed to come see him. We had a nurse, stitched him up, did an absolutely horrible job of suturing, and we brought him back to the mission station. Every day, he would come to our house, and y'all excuse me. He'd hop up on the kitchen counter, put his knee over the sink, and we'd wash his knee out as the wound with betadine. We did our absolute best to keep it from getting infected. Carol would hand me supplies. She doesn't do blood and wounds very much. But that's just the thing. Our kitchen became the ER. My medical background was just minimal, but it was more than the local area could provide. So Carol helped. We took care of what we could. But mission work is just meeting people's needs. It's the physical needs and the spiritual needs. It's learning the national and the local culture so that we could understand why a third world country is the way it is. We are incredibly blessed to be here with all the incredible resources we have here. It's just massively different. But those are some of the bad things. Some of the good things deserve to be mentioned. One night, close to midnight, I went up to check the well because it was electrical. It had problems. And if we wanted water for 45 people the next day, often I'd have to go check it late at night. So I went to check one night, and I heard what sounded like angels singing. It wasn't angels. It was the local girls who were daughters and nieces of one of the ladies who worked on the mission station. The lady's name's Nomsy. Her husband had gone to the city to find work. He came back to visit and gave her AIDS because the men largely are not faithful. So she was one of our good friends, and she's passed. But the girls were out that night singing worship, singing in the dark. There's no street lights, no anything. Just And I think in one of the pictures there shows a street light in the back. We didn't have it hooked up because we didn't have power most of the time. But, oh my goodness. But being out after dark was not what you normally would want to do. So when I would go from the house to the well house, it's like from here to y'all's cemetery, I didn't carry a flashlight because I didn't want to be seen, because you could be attacked, even within the mission station. And we had 6-foot-high concrete walls around it. But once or twice, Carol had to go out after dark. It's a funny thing to me. It wasn't funny at the time. But she went out to dump some leftover food out for the wildlife, because this was supposed to be a good thing. It was very, we didn't have anywhere to dispose of it elsewhere. And so she goes walking out toward this big cement wall, and she heard something. And it was a baboon, but she didn't know it, and they have teeth about that big. And he was basically saying, you should really get back. They're rather dangerous. So that, I think it was funny after she got back in the house. But there's good things about mission work. There's little funny things that happen. It's finally seeing an elephant. I love animals. I love to hunt. Stephen and I talk about hunting sometimes. But we were driving into the city to get supplies, and we pulled over somewhere because I saw an elephant. So I got out because I'm going to get pictures. And I went up way too close, like from here to the kitchen. The elephant looked at me, went back to eating. I got a couple of pictures. I boogied back to the car, or to the truck. It didn't occur to Carol that this was a wild elephant. And it took a long, long time for her to really grasp it. This was a wild elephant. It had escaped from somewhere. There are smaller safari parks that are just a few thousand acres. And it had gotten out, and that was that. Nobody was going to go get it. What do? You go lasso it? It's an elephant. No, they just fixed the fence and said, oh well. But seeing an elephant up close and personal. You see on that picture, Carol sitting down peeling potatoes with the girls, making lunch for all the rest of the students. There's the Great Commission in their language. I can't really begin to pronounce it correctly. There's our friend. But mission work is great. It was the best part of our lives, other than seeing our children born. But it's a lot of things. It's teaching theology in the morning while you teach plumbing in the afternoon. Because things leak, things break. Somebody's got to fix it. I was the only one that knew. Mission work is mixing concrete blocks and doing masonry, and trying to also do electrical work, which I'm not good at, especially when they don't run on 110 voltage, they run on 220. So everything you touch is potentially deadly. Mission work is going out to a village like these, and the kids will mob you or mob me. I was a white guy in a place that they don't see white people. I had a truck. They don't see very many white trucks or very many trucks, period. But those are just some of the things. For the first 5 months, we walked everywhere in town. Town was a half a mile long. The market was on the other end of town. We didn't have a truck. Trucks, even in Africa, are expensive. So we saved and we saved, and we wrote to our supporters back in the States, hey, we could really use a truck. Somebody came through with a very large check, and we were able to get a truck. It helped tremendously. Mission work is teaching people to use a chainsaw when they've never seen a chainsaw. They've never heard one. It's scary. It's preaching and encouraging. And I'd never preached before. first time I went with one of my students back to his home church. I thought we were going to visit. He wanted me to meet his pastor. Got there, and the pastor says, "Oh, good to see you. Thank you for coming. Looking forward to what you have to say today." So, was not really prepared to preach. But the Lord works things out. I had a few notes in my Bible. They had a picture up on the wall. And this was an abandoned schoolhouse they were meeting in. So I preached. And I had my student, who's a high school graduate, had him translate into their language, which helped me a lot because I'm not a great speaker. And I could say one sentence, and I could look at him, and he would translate. I could think of the next sentence. It kind of worked well for me. But 3 people got saved. 3 people. Because as I started most of the time the same way I started here today. I'm going to tell you what you've already heard. I'm going to tell you in a different way. I hope it resonates. But that's it. It's just taking the opportunities that God provides. So it's like I said, preaching. It's encouraging people. It's visiting the sick, which is extremely scary when you know they're HIV positive and you know they've got about a week to go before they die and they're sweating. And you know you're going to go back to your family and potentially expose them. So when we finally came back to the States, one of the things we did is we had ourselves and each of our children tested for HIV, and we were praying for several days till the results came back and we were all clear. And we were thankful. Very, very. But mission work, in our experience, was teaching people. It was teaching the pastors, teaching the students. They had only seen a computer on TV, and we had one, so that was the need. That's what we provided. It's living in a place where the local market sells caskets alongside hammers, nails, and baby food. It's their version of Walmart. It was called Msingini, if anybody wants to learn a little bit more of the language. If you say, well, I'm going to Msingini, everybody knew. It's the market on the other side of town that has a very, very poor selection of a lot of things. But if you needed a casket, they have that also. Death was just prevalent. But mission work for us was organizing youth activities and just listening to people. The girls would come over to our house. I say the girls, the young ladies who were at Bible college. It's playing soccer with the kids. It's fixing the well because nobody else in town could. It's having meals together. Explaining water filtration and storage of water, because there's a dry season where even the creeks run dry and they just get dehydrated and people die. So you saw those great big green tanks. That's rainwater storage. And I put them in, I built the foundation, taught people how to use them, and put a spigot on the bottom like we have for a garden hose. But I purposefully did that so that they could not waste but just a little bit. It would not give you much at a time. But that's the kind of planning that you have to do. Even with 4,000 gallons, and I put in 2 of them. You see there, that little tree. Hunger was a massive problem. And I saw somebody pick a little green fruit about that big one time. And I asked them what it is. They said it's an orange. So that's very unusual, orange. I said, why do you pick it when it looks young? It looks like it's not ready. He said, well, if I don't pick it, somebody else will. Because they're hungry. So I went to the city. We would go occasionally to get supplies. And I bought a bunch of orange trees. And I planted them in a place that would get runoff water. So we didn't have to automatically water them. The Lord would provide. We just had to place them in the right place. So many things. At our home, like I said, the water came from a town, and it was dirty water. Most days, Carol would boil several gallons of water to kill the pathogens, and we'd let it settle for 24 hours. And it would get something that looked like mud in the bottom, and above that it would be clear and effectively clean. And we would siphon the water off until it got close to the mud level. And that would be the drinking water, or the brushing your teeth water, washing your hands type water. But that's just, you don't want what I got once. We call it the African water diet. Bad water. You can't tell it now, but back then, maybe some of the pictures you'll see, I was really slim. That's not just me being young. I lost 30 pounds over 2 weeks. Carol thought I was going to die. I kind of thought I was going to die. So that's when I put in the rainwater collection tanks. But Carol worked with the young ladies. She taught them to use a measuring cup and to follow a recipe. This was new information. They'd never heard of it. A typical meal for the students was bread and boiled cabbage, rice, and beets. I'm a picky eater. That was not very good to me. Okay? Special meals had soup or maybe some sheep. Went to one of the villages one time with Fuma, and he had organized a bunch of men to come together to hear the American. So I said, I'm going to tell you what you've already heard. I'm going to tell you in a new way, and I did. And after our little meeting, one of the ladies from another room, because it's a very different society, women do not mix with the men most of the time. One of the ladies came from another room, and she had on her skirt and a bracelet, and that was kind of it. Got my full attention, and I was, oh my goodness gracious. One of the men said something to her, and she turned and scurried away and came back with a blouse on, which I appreciated. But their special meal would be a plate of sheep fat cut into chunks, about 2 inches by 2 inches, and it's boiled. No seasonings. This is the specialty. It's not my favorite. So what else do you do as a missionary? You go and you be the friend. You be the teacher. You fill in the need, whatever it is, whether it's the well or the concrete wall or anything else. You just do what needs to be done. So we got an invitation one day. Fuma came over. Said, Umfundizi, there's a such and such a high school has asked you to come and speak. I said, well, what high school is this? Well, it's 5 miles, 8 kilometers from here. Why would I go speak there? They've invited you. They've heard that you're here. Shocking. They just heard an American was nearby. So I went with Fuma, went with several of my best students, and they shut down the school, gathered everybody in the biggest room, and told us they were ready. So we went in. They look at me. I'm the, tall white guy. They'd never seen one before. We were out in the middle of nowhere, seemed like. So I started speaking with my strong American accent, and they ate it up. And I just told them about the gospel. I told them that God, whom they maybe had heard about, had asked me to come. And this is what I was going to tell them. And I told them, here's the good news. Here's the cross. Here's Jesus, who was living, was crucified, died, buried, and resurrected. And I had my students translate it. I'm going to jump ahead here, one thing, because it's time. I asked Stephen earlier by text about how many chairs are in this room, and he responded, probably 100. When you speak to groups like that in a high school, in a foreign country, where you're the extremely odd-looking guy with an accent that is so different from theirs, they listen and they soak it up like a sponge, especially when their economy is terrible and their healthcare system is terrible and people are dying, and you come and you speak about life and about hope, salvation, and they soaked it up like sponges. There's roughly 100 chairs in here. In our time in Africa, I went to over 10 high schools. I lost track of the exact number. And I would speak, and my students would translate. And they got practice. They would preach as well. And so we would ask for a show of hands. Who understands what we're talking about? A lot of hands would go up. Who has this been a first time for? Some hands would go up. Who recognizes the validity and the truth in your spirit of Jesus? Who wants to turn their life over and follow after God, who would send somebody to talk to you? And hands would go up. You have roughly 100 chairs in here. I would ask you to take a guess. I'll save time, I'll tell you. Roughly 300 people in a year, conservatively, we count as people who got saved. So as you pray and you think about missions, you have other people, you have people you maybe support. This is what it is. It's all this and so much more. My students graduated. I'm still in touch with a few of them. Several have dropped off the face of the internet. Don't know where they went. But a few are pastors. They're teaching and leading local churches. They're giving the same information that people have heard. They're giving it in a new and different way. They're being consistent. They're being faithful to the message. They've been faithful to the calling that God put on their life. So that's what mission work is in a lot of ways. There's just some examples from our experience. I have friends that went to Africa and spent 8 years at 0 salvations. 0. Because the fields were not ready for harvest. They planted a lot of seeds and they watered a lot of seeds spiritually, but nobody got saved. And it breaks my heart. When I was young, I was dragged into church because my parents are Christians. My dad told me I left marks in the parking lot where he dragged me in. And one day, I heard a missionary speak, and it touched me. And I gave my heart to God. And I've not followed very well, but I do my best. So I would say, I just want to encourage you, and I want to challenge you where you can be the farm family, the church family that is involved with missions. Support mission activities, whether it's local, whether it's the grocery store, whether it's an outreach anywhere. But especially my heart is for international long-term family missions. It's just I'm biased toward that. Okay. Oh, give me a second here. Eyes are watering. I don't know why that would be. But if God ever lays it on your heart to go, pray about it. Seek counsel from godly pastors. I think you got a great one. If you talk to people who are thinking about going on mission trips, have them seek counsel and pray about it. And if at all possible, go and encourage others to go, because that's where the harvest is white, ready for picking, ready for gathering up and putting in the storage of God's kingdom. I'll finish up here. Acts 13:47. For this is what the Lord has commanded us. I have made you a light for the Gentiles, that you may bring salvation to the ends of the earth. To the ends of the earth. Then in Romans 10, for everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. How then can they call on the one they have not believed in? We take it for granted because we live in the South. It's the buckle of the Bible Belt. There's a lot of people that don't live here. How can they call on the one they have not believed in? And how can they believe in the one of whom they have not heard? And how can they hear without someone preaching to them? They can't. That's the challenge and the encouragement that I can leave you with today. That's all I've got, is that God has saved me. He has used me without any doubt. And he continues to touch my heart. And you can see occasionally touch my eyes, make them water. But this is the encouragement. If you're thinking about mission work one day, continue thinking, but pray about it and maybe go. Your life will never be changed any more than leading people to God. It's that important. Their life can be so strongly impacted. You have little projects. Teach English, teach theology in the morning. Teach people to do plumbing in the afternoon. Some places have massive poverty, but the people are so much wanting to get ahead. They take an old car and rebuild it into something they could travel on. If your truck gets stuck in the mud going up a mountain, send people this way, that way. Somebody may come back with 6 oxen to drag your truck up to the top of the mountain. For us, when we found out people didn't have Bibles, I wrote to the people back in the States, and they sent money, and we bought I think 6 cases of Bibles in the Xhosa language. It's planting trees. It's putting water in people's hands. There's so many things. That is evangelism. That is missions. The small things, Carol doesn't get credit for a lot of the times. She's very humble. Out there peeling potatoes. There's so many things that are just the work of missions. And the local people know the Great Commission. The local pastors are doing their best, but they need help. So I would say, give the help where you can. That's the job. Thank you. Stephen? Thank you for letting me come tonight.